coming. My name is Christine Higgins, and I started Three Principles New England, I guess, about 2 years ago now. This is our second speaker series. And what we are doing with this webinar is we're pairing coaches or practitioners from New England, Sharon, with practitioners and coaches from outside of New England, Jacqueline. And today, we've got two lovely ladies sharing stories of personal transformation and also the transformation they've seen with their work in the prisons. So I am going to toss the baton and let you ladies get going.
Thank you. It's I'm really excited to be here and be paired with Sharon, especially since we shared some experiences last summer, which we're both grateful for. So we talked about this. What was the title? The Brilliance.
Infinite Brilliance.
Infinite Brilliance. Infinite Brilliance of transformation. So just in case, I'll just explain that who I am. I'm Jacqueline Hollows, and I have a social enterprise, which is basically a non-profit in England, which uses three principles understanding to teach people who are in prison, mainly the inmates. That's the focus of our work, but we also work with the officers and support staff as well. And the main people, my favourite people to work with, are the people who are the hardest to reach, who are usually they fall out of the net of the other interventions. So they will have probably multiple and complex needs according to the system. So they might have mental health issues, addiction issues, homelessness issues, and a whole garden variety of other things. Although we're attracting more and more actually sort of gang nominals and those types of people as well now. So they're my favourite people to work with because that's where I see the most transformation and the most brilliance, actually. And I've been doing that work for 3 years. It's evidence-based, so we research, we evidence the work that we're doing, and we've produced research papers. One has been published in an academic journal, and we also present that around the world. I've just come back from Singapore, so that's pretty cool as well, as an aside. And we had a little chat prior to this call, and Sharon mentioned a story that I've told before as a little sort of warm-up story, which is a really cool way of describing why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I come to be doing it. And it points to so many lessons and so many things behind this sort of human experience. So when I am not from a mental health or addictions background. I'm from a business background, IT, information technology and customer services. But through Insight, I came to start working with people in recovery from addictions, and that became my passion. And I had and still have a burning desire to revolutionise the way that we see and the way that we treat addictions and mental health issues, and now offending behaviour. And I ended up working in a prison again through a variety of reasons, and some synchronicity, and a lot of following the breadcrumbs. And so there I am on this first day in prison. To get there, I've had to write a business case, and I've had to go through quite a lot of training. It's a very bureaucratic environment. I'm a key holder, so I had to get trained in keys and radios, and they also train you on how manipulative people are in prison, like they're not in the rest of life. And how you could be taken hostage, and so on. So basically they scare you to death with all the horror stories. And on a less flippant note, these things do happen, and that's why the officers also need a lot of help as well, because they are in a very difficult environment. And so I'm armed with all these stories, and I'm armed with all my notes, and I've never run a group before, and I've never worked in a prison before, and I've just got this burning passion and desire to do this, but I don't really know why. And I feel like I don't even really know what I'm doing. I've sort of know a little bit about the principles. I've been impacted, but I don't really know what to share or how to share it. So I start, and it's Monday morning, and there'd been an incident in the prison that weekend. And when there's an incident, the men get locked up. So they'd been locked up all weekend, and it was June, so it was hot. So they weren't happy. So my first experience was, because the classroom is on the wing where they live, and my first experience was that a lot of noise, quite smelly, lots of smell of laundry and cabbage and sort of not very nice smells, boy smells, that, you know, a bit of a battered building, and I'm standing there, and all the men are banging their cups on their cell doors and creating havoc because they're not happy. And it was just like the movies. So it was just like, this is the movies. Like, I'm in a prison and it is just like the movies. So I was totally petrified, and I was standing there thinking, what am I doing? You know, when I thought about being a coach, I imagined being in a 5-star hotel in Hawaii, and here I am in this grubby little prison in the middle of England. Like, what's going on? So anyway, they get released, and I'm standing there at my door with my little clipboard and all the names on it. And it is pretty chaotic, I have to say. I don't know if you agree with me, Sharon, but it's like, it is noisy. They run around. Some of them haven't got their tops on. That, you know, they're sort of shouting. Someone else has got music blaring, and there's chaos everywhere. And as soon as there's a woman in the building, of course, everybody wants to know who the woman is. So they're constantly coming up to you and asking you who you are and where are you from, and you know, what you're doing here, and so on, you know, naturally curious. And this big guy comes up to me, and as I saw it then, he looked like a prisoner. You know, he's big, he's got a tattoo on his neck, he's shaven head, he looks scary to me. And I'm sort of standing there trying to look, you know, with authority at my door. And he says, can I come in, miss? And I said, what's your name? You know, and sort of look at my list, because we've been told, do not let anyone in who's not on your list. And he said, oh, I'm not on the list. So I said, oh, thinking, what on earth do I do now? And there's a moment, and he said, I just want to have a look at the chicks. And in the UK, that's a slang word for women. So I thought, oh my God, he wants to look at the female officers through the window or something, you know, like, I don't even know what's going on here. So I said, oh, well, okay then, because I didn't know what else to say. if you're quick. And so he comes in the room and he moves my flip chart out the way, which is in front of the window. And Henry looks out the window. And on the window ledge is a nest with a bird sitting on the eggs. So those were the chicks that he wanted to look at. And then he tells me that he's out in 2 weeks and he was really hoping that the eggs would be hatched before he left because he wanted to see the chicks. And what I say when I tell this story is that it was such a humbling experience for me. First of all, I realised how much invisible thinking I had about the very people that I wanted to work with. That I came here with this love in my heart and this open mind, and yet there was all this judgment and thinking about myself and my own safety and my own this and that. And the other reason it was humbling is that I just realised the humanity of the people that I was about to work with, and how no matter where we are or what we're experiencing, is that we all have that love, we all have that desire to connect with nature, to connect, to enjoy something that isn't just in whatever is going on. To see a big man like that wanting to see the chicks hatch, and to me now it looks like, of course, men like flowers, right? Men enjoy sunshine. No matter who we are, we want to have that love and connection in our lives. And I don't even know what that man's name is, but he saved Beyond Recovery. He saved my program because he literally brought me back to myself in that moment. And I was able then to work with the rest of the guys and see when I had judgment. And one of the things that came from that insight was that I know 100% that if ever I have a judgment about somebody else, it's me that I should look at first and not them. And it's not what they're doing or how they're being. It's what I'm creating about them, and that therefore there's something within me that's arising that I need to take care of. So that's the story of the chicks. Was it as good this time round, Sharon?
I've heard this story a few times. It moves me so much, and every time you get to the word nest, and I know you tell the story a bunch of different ways, but the tear ducts just start. I feel like Pavlov's dog. I'm just nest.
I'll remember that.
Because I'll just be awash. Yeah. When I first heard you tell that story, actually, Jacqueline, I was in Salt Spring Island, which is where Sydney Banks originally had this insight. He was from there. He lived there for a long time and shared this there. And I just was so moved by it. And honestly, from the first time I heard about prison work, which was maybe 20 years ago, it was a long time ago when I first started learning about the principles and hearing about Sydney Banks being in prisons and just speaking with people with a very clear view of their perfection and their humanity and what's totally right with them, and a commonality, a shared humanness with them. I just hoped that someday I would get there and get into the prison system. And then I heard you share that story in Salt Spring Island. And after Jacqueline was done speaking, I had to go talk to her and say, when can I come into the prisons with you? And you were so kind to bring me in. And it's not like these moments don't happen with the grocery clerk or the neighbor or the family member or the friend, you know, that you're in a misunderstanding with, and then you see clearly. The stories happen all the time. There's just something so profoundly hopeful for me about being in such a difficult environment with concrete and bars and all of the things you talked about, with people who could feel completely hopeless because they're locked up. And witnessing the kind of transformation that we witnessed, even in just like the first half hour, right? And I left prison that day thinking, there's no one anywhere that's beyond reach, anywhere. There's none of us, no matter what we're up against, that can't have insight and be touched. And that when that happens, the love that comes out of us just touches others. And so it wasn't just the story. I mean, the story is so beautiful because it shows us, like you said, that invisible thinking that puts up a separation and a barrier between us and another human. But it's also the fact of what happens to people when they learn this in that environment, in the most dismal environments, right? So I'm so pleased. My name's Sharon Strimling. I didn't really get to introduce myself. I'm a coach and consultant from Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts in the United States. And I've been fortunate enough to be around the principles for a long time. And over the past couple of years have really been just pouring my heart into this work because I see it as so profoundly transformative. And that day in the prisons, I not only saw the hope for humanity and for what happens for people when they're touched by their true selves, when they see how beautiful they really are. But also, Jacqueline, I want to speak to what happens with people in those prisons when they get touched, because I only have a limited experience, and you can say more, but my experience is that the moment those men were touched, they were sharing it with the other men in the room. They were handing them tissues, they were putting their hands out, they were fully engaged and loving of the other men in the room. And that then when they've learned something, they're turning around and they're sharing it themselves with others in the prison. They're wanting to coach others and be there for others. So not only is it hopeful for them, but to me, I see that for any of us, when we're touched, it seems to me like we want to share. Like that's what happens. We get touched and then we want to share. Like that's just what we're made of. But when you've been that down and that hurt, like it's almost like the more down you've been and the more hurt you are, there's this fire that can come up to really want to be an agent of change in the world. And I remember leaving that day thinking, I want to teach alongside these guys at some point because they're so passionate to share it with the world. Like they're an ally in bringing love out to others, and they know so personally and so deeply how much pain they can come from and still emerge from.
And it's a good segue into talking about the one of the things we do is we run practitioner programs in jail. So the guys who've been around for a while and have been touched and do start sharing can do a practitioner program. And we had two guys graduate last year, and one of them was at the Free Principles Conference in May and did the opening session at the Free Principles Conference this year, and literally blew everyone away. Judy Banks was at the conference and she said it could end now. He was and he was like he'd been doing it forever. He just was so natural and humble and beautiful and just amazing. And I met with a potential investor the next day, and he was only, because he's still in prison, he's in an open prison, but he was released for the day, and so he could only attend one day. And I got in touch with him that evening and said, oh, I wish this guy had seen you. And he said, but he doesn't need to see me, the work speaks for itself. And it's so true. This is not about any individual or any one of us or any one of them. The work speaks for itself. And we've just graduated yesterday 4 more practitioners who've just been on a 6-month training program. And it's interesting what Sharon said there, because we don't run the groups anymore. They run the groups, and we're just there. And we really are there as, well, first of all, the key holders. So, we let people in and out, and occasionally setting the tone or just bringing it together. But they're running the groups, and the impact is even stronger because it's their peers. It's their peers that are running the group, and they can speak the same language. So many of the barriers that, which are illusions, of course, but they don't know that yet. But many of the illusionary barriers that the men bring in when they see, some white chicks at the front, trying to teach them some things, middle-aged as well, not even attractive. I'll take that bit back. They don't exist when they see two people who know what their experience is and who have lived, the sort of lives that they've lived. And the other thing that I picked up from what you were saying there is that many of the men that we get now are not even at that sort of, I'm in despair, I'm at rock bottom. They're in, this is my lifestyle. I don't know how to do anything else. I've done this always. I don't know any other business apart from selling drugs or running guns. I don't know how to do anything or have relationships that's outside of what I've got. So they're not really at rock bottom. They're more like CEOs who say, well, I hate my job, but it's only 10 years before I retire. So
right.
it's the same, right? Because we're all trapped in that prison of our own mind of, this is who I am and this is what I've got to do. And that's been really fascinating to see them pop out of their limiting illusion.
Right.
And for myself too, because as the programs develop themselves, I'm always pushing against the boundaries. What could we try? What next? So we just had 41 men in a group, and 23 of them were new people. That's a really big group in prison to have. And it was astounding. Like 2 days with these guys, and they're equals. They're totally equals. They're sharing, like you said, and their voice is so clear and so true. I don't know. I really don't know what's happened. And I was listening to Sid Banks today, and something caught my attention, which was, he said something like, if you meet a teacher that makes sense, move away from the teacher, because the truth doesn't make sense. The truth is a mystery. It is something that we can't understand and get our heads around. And when I look at that room, I cannot get my head around what's occurring. It's like some sort of magic blanket has come and fairy dust or something. And people who, you know, start off being very yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, end up saying, I saw this, or I saw that, or this should be shared with children. And, you know, they end up seeing way deeper than I can see. And they end up leaping to a different level of consciousness that I'm like, wow, take me there with you.
It happens all the time, doesn't it? We're sharing this with people, and then, like, this has happened to me over the past few days, with people that I've been sharing with, where I've been like, oh, I hadn't seen it that, like, I hadn't seen that before, like, and I've gotten tears in my eyes and been so grateful. And it's such a blessing to work with other people in that space of this infinite source that's not us, and it is us, but it's so much bigger than us. And that's why, like, the name Infinite Brilliance really stood out for me, because there's this brilliance, but it is infinite. And the longer we sit in this space, this brilliance comes through everybody. It comes through anybody at any moment. And it's completely unlimited by anything I've seen before or anything I think I know.
Yeah.
And it's such a magical, I always say, like, it can take a few days to get this and have your life shift dramatically. Like, my life changed dramatically in 4 days. And from what I've seen with others, people's lives changed dramatically in a few days. It's not years and years and years of work. And many of us who've been touched by this will spend years and years and years in it. Because there's no longer a life that needs to be fixed, but there's an incredibly beautiful and rich exploration that can happen for the rest of my life. That why wouldn't I want to do that?
Yeah.
Right? It's like you say, it's just looking to the magic and living a life has an intimacy with magic.
Yeah, and you don't know as well. It's like that thing about limitless possibility, and the brilliance is infinite, and the possibility is infinite, and is beyond. Like, I can see that I'm only ever seeing my own thinking. You know, I'm literally only ever, and I know that because I'll say something, somebody will ask me a question and I'll answer the question, and what they hear is so profound. I know I didn't say it. So they're literally hearing themselves. Right? So I know they're hearing their own profundity. It didn't come from me. And yet they heard it through what I said wherever I was. And that connected together, and they hear something. And it happened on a webinar the other night when a guy asked me this question, very practical question, and I gave him my answer, and then what he repeated back, I wish I said, because it was so good. And it was what he heard himself. And that when we're bored, we're, you know, or sort of like, oh, I've heard that before. The reason why you can hear a story again and again is because you're listening to yourself, to where what you're thinking about it. And if you're open, and if you're ready to hear something new, you will hear it. It will be profound every time you hear it. And when you're telling it, like, I never tell that story the same, because I'm telling it fresh from now. What I'm seeing about it now and how I feel about it now. But you reminded me of the guy that, so we ran these smoking cessation beyond cravings programs to deal with cravings, because the prison went smoke free last month. And a guy came on the program, and he looked like he'd had a hard life, let's say. So here I am with my judgment bag again. But he had no teeth. He had glasses that had been taped up. You know, he's sort of very, very grey. very, big tattoo on his neck. Very, the other men don't react well with men like that. So, the sort of the more gangstery men don't really like those men. And what's fascinating is they're all in the same room and they all end up loving each other. And so this guy's there, and he comes along 3 weeks ago, and he's self-harmed the whole of his life. He's self-harmed, and he's just scarred everywhere. And that night he went back to his cell and he got his razor out and he went to self-harm. And then he suddenly realized, actually, I always feel the same after I've self-harmed, so I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. So he didn't. And he hasn't self-harmed for 3 weeks. And then he remembered that somebody had said, write your thoughts and feelings down in a therapy that he'd done before. And he thought, why don't I write myself a letter? And he wrote himself a letter, and he got it out of his head, and then he ripped it all up and threw it down the toilet and flushed it away. So he was like, wow, unbelievable, right? He came into class the next day and he said, this is what's happened to me. Absolutely unbelievable. So he hasn't been, and then he came to class this week on Wednesday, and the night before he decided to self-harm. So he cut himself on the chest this time. And when they do that, they come with paperwork that you have to observe them every 2 hours to check that they're, not doing something to themselves. So he came in with this pile of paperwork and an officer and so on. And then he sits in group and he tells this story. And so he's this, like I say, pasty, sort of looks like a drug addict, really, really looks like someone who maybe isn't even had any education. And there's another guy who probably lives in the gym. His arms are bigger than my thighs. Don't think about my thighs. He's just, he's enormous, very handsome, young black guy. And he's sitting there with his cap on, and he turned around to the guy and said, what's your name? And he told him his name, and he said, I'm your friend, mate. You can come and talk to me anytime, and shook his hand. So that's the magic of it. And then I'm sitting beside him on the second day, and he said, I haven't told you about my plans. And this guy starts telling me about these amazing plans he's got to start a shelter for care leavers, people who have been in care and foster homes, when he gets out of prison in 2 weeks' time, in the north of England. And it's going to have an art room and a computer room and all of these things. And he's written the plans for it, and he's written the business plan for it. And he's got some sort of compensation for something that happened to him in prison. And he's going to use his compensation to build this shelter for care leavers. And again, like you said, you're learning all the time. I was like, wow, even though I love him and I totally know it's within him, I know that I had some invisible thinking about what he's capable of, and it never came to the front, but I know it was there. And when he told me this, I was blown away. So I'm constantly humbled by the men I work with. So no wonder, I say I feel blessed. But it speaks to your point of that infinite brilliance. When that light turns on inside us, it's always on, but when it gets uncovered, even a little, the brilliance that can come from that and the possibility that can come from that goes so way beyond our conditioning, our learning, our education, our culture, anything. It's way beyond. It's the spark of life, basically, isn't it? It's the essence of life.
Oh, I just love that story. it reminds me how I'm continually blown away, even in the work that we do and what we see all the time and the stories that we hear all the time. There's that moment of, whoa, how? Where did this come from? That even though it's so real and it's the world that I live in, you know, so much of the time psychologically is, wow, there's just this wondrous world. There's this wondrous intelligence. There's this wondrous fact of amazing creativity for beautiful results. I still find myself surprised. Like, how can it be this good and then this good and then this good, you know?
I know. I think isn't that the magic of it though, that it's completely normal and ordinary, and yet it's completely awesome.
Yeah.
And surprising at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an important point. And I think it's also a really good one to bring up in a, you know, we're talking about these infinite brilliant stories of transformation, these really powerful stories that are so dramatic and make me cry. But then there's also like, it's every day. It's every time I turn a corner, oh, I should go this way instead of this way, you know, or, you know, like it just makes sense to me to like eat this today. Like, I think the amount that our intelligence and our insight is in our lives all the time and gets taken for granted. Like, I don't even notice it. But there was this young child who had a neurological condition, and I had a very short time to be with him, but I knew that he was the most gorgeous, adorable little child. His eyes were cross-eyed, and he was all smiles. He'd been taught since he was little that he was given this neurological condition, and who else could deal with it but him, because he's so amazing, right? And he can do anything he wants to do, and just like tons of love. Like, he's just been really blessed with that. But anyway, he's walking around holding his pants up because he got the thought that his pants might fall down. And he gets kind of anxious about it. So I had like just a few minutes with him. I had a dinner with the family, and it wasn't about him, but I was like, what's going to occur to me that might be useful to this little child, right? So anyway, in the middle of dinner, he just blurts out that he's going to Yale. He says, I figured out I'm going to Yale. And he's like 6, right? And it's a university anyway. So I said to him, wow, like we all were like, oh, wow, okay, great, you know? And I said to him, well, why, you know, how did you pick Yale, right? And he kind of he looked up and he said, I don't know, it just popped into my head. Yale just popped into my head. And I said, wow, well, where did it pop in from? And his eyes got really big. And he just got so curious. And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, yeah, I don't know either. But isn't it fun to wonder about it, right? And we're just in this moment of wondering about the most ordinary thing, which is that we have thought coming to us. And where the heck is it coming from? But it impacts us. We have thought and it brings us something. And it happens all day long. And so he's just started getting really curious about thought. Yeah. And that was it. Like, end of story. Who knows what happened next, you know? But it is so ordinary, and it's every day, and it's everything we do, and yet it's magical and beautiful at the same time. Yeah.
That's so gorgeous. So gorgeous.
I think it's such an amazing thing to just have a chance to see something we haven't seen before and to wonder about something. It's so incredibly expansive for anybody, at any time.
You know what I really love though about your story, Sharon? I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, of course. But I really love the simplicity of it. You know how, like, for me anyway, and I don't know if there's other people on this call how you can get so caught up with how to share and what to do next and what this and what that and how this and how that. And your story wraps up, it knocks it out the park. That's an American saying, isn't it? Yeah, got one in. You just wondered what can I say that might be helpful, and you just left that, and you left mind to take care of that, and then you were presented with this opportunity to connect and engage with him in what made sense to him, and point him in a direction without any teaching tools, backup. We don't know what the end of that story is. Just in the moment, being you, being loving and curious, and pointing him in a loving, curious way. And how that can change the course of somebody's life in an instant, and that we don't know how many lives we change constantly by being like that, and that's way more important than trying to do something or create something or develop something. That just comes. Those opportunities are there every single day. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. As you were saying that, it's occurred to me a few times that I'm not sure where everyone's coming from in this group, because that was really to people who want to share, right? Whether professionally or just in life, right? So I wonder if we want to open it up and just see if anybody has anything particular that they're curious about or wondering about or would like to hear about.
Hi, Sharon. This is Thea.
Hi. Oh, wonderful.
I am so moved by what I am hearing here, and I'm going to try to say this without crying. But I have a son who's in prison, and I had been invited this evening to participate in a project that's taking meditation into the prison systems. And I'm finding this completely synchronistic, by no accident, obviously, that I would be in this portal with you, hearing the stories that I'm hearing as I am considering going to another level of working with this particular foundation that is bringing this into the prisons this evening. It took them 4 years to be able to, they've done the hard work of the 4 years of getting it to this point. And I'm feeling grateful to, have been invited at this point to participate. But having a son in prison, it is an invisible population from the general public. And I am just so grateful for the work that you are doing. I am so moved. I am so hopeful. And it feels very deep and very synchronistic. So I just wanted to share that we don't all end up in these connections by, by accident. It's pure grace. And
Oh.
just the whole, thought is creative. And I'm just now hearing about the three principles. I mean, I used to live in British Columbia, so I find that connection interesting. But I'm just being introduced to this through you, Sharon, and your invitation to be part of this webinar today. And so thank you so much for affirming that, being on the right path. And I always consider myself to be called by the muse as a creative person. And this is putting it in a context that is even more affirming, where the world of discipline and structure would have us think that I'm going in too many different directions because I'm going where I'm called. Yet the divine intelligence and perfection of it is how I've lived my life. And so I just get to come back to connection with it through this and you today. So thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Thea and I just met on the phone a few days ago. Thank you so much for sharing, and gosh, everything you said so beautiful. I don't even want to try to wrap it up. It's just beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, we haven't, we've been sharing stories and not so much speaking like what this teaching really is, right? Is anyone, I don't know if anybody else is new to the principles. Is anybody feeling a little confused, or are you just enjoying the stories, or anybody have a question? Yeah, hi. Oh, I think you're muted, so let's unmute you. Christine, are you, thank you.
Hi, Sharon. It's Ellen Brewster.
Ellen!
Adam encouraged me to get on the webinar today.
I hoped it was you, but
I'm not familiar with the principles, and I don't expect in the time that you have left that you'll be able to cover all of that. But the stories are nevertheless beautiful, and I'm sure that I can speak to Adam a little bit more about it. But I just wanted to acknowledge that I was here and let you know that I'm sitting here totally oblivious, although he did give me a very nice little storybook written by Sydney Banks for Mother's Day. It was just a very short story, forget the name of it, about a little girl named Liza. I don't know if you've read it.
Dear Liza.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to take up time for people who might have succinct questions, but I just wanted to let you know that despite the fact that I'm coming from no knowledge of this, it's been very heartwarming seminar. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's so nice to see you again. My gosh.
Thanks. Same here.
Oh, we got someone waving too.
Hi.
Hi, Chris.
I always have to ask, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I just still don't believe this works. I just wanted to make a comment that there's nothing more baffling than to ask somebody who's into the principles what they are. Did you have to ask that? We were having such a great time. Isn't it? I mean, I'm no expert. I think I've been into it for a while, like 5, 6, I don't know. Pretty much whenever Mike O'Neill started getting into it, kind of followed him. And I listened to people with that have been into it for 2 years or 4 years, and I'm like, geez, I don't know anything. They seem like, I don't know. My story is, as of lately, I've been just settling into, some days I feel like I don't know anything at all. And my only experience trying to teach it is usually like chasing people down the street and trying to hold them down to tell them about the 3 principles. And that doesn't work at all. There's always that expression, hold still while I 3P you. But the less I try, I mean, I do have some friends that don't really want to hear anything about it, but they go, gee, you know, when I talk to you, I just get really relaxed and feel really good hanging out with you. And that's as close as I've gotten to like transferring whatever this is. Except don't ask me what it is. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you so much. Jacqueline, we just have a few minutes left, and I didn't know. Thank you guys for speaking up though, because it's so lovely to hear from you and not be the only ones talking, right? So, but I wanted to. I don't know if we have time for a quick addiction story. Or if we should just mention that anything that somebody comes in with. I mean, when you talked about cutting, that is, you know, that's an addiction story.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. So people can go if they need to go, and I know that Christine has to go, so she's really important because she's like running it. So I'll tell a really quick story, but it does speak to what you just said. Is that it really doesn't matter what people come with, including myself. Addiction, physical pain, relationship, business, finance, any mental health. I've worked with schizophrenia, bipolar, personality disorder, pretty much everything, autism. So it really doesn't matter what the problem is. But for the addiction story, because that's sort of like a really ingrained way of understanding the way that our mind works currently, the current paradigm, you know, is this disease model around addiction, and everything is based on that. It's based on a misunderstanding. That is literally a misunderstanding. It was somebody had their insight, and then, you know, everything's developed from there, like everything, and it simply isn't a disease, because as you said, cutting is an addiction. Anything that we can obsessively think about and feel that relieves us in some way, or gives us some feeling that we want to have that we haven't currently got, can be an addiction. If you do it time and time again, it's a habit, it's an addictive habit. And that's all that addiction is. It's a misunderstanding that we can get a feeling from something outside of ourselves. And the hook of addiction is simply that we see that when we do something, whether that's shopping or cutting or taking something, when we get relief, and then we think that thing created that relief, and all it is that it's actually, there's a middleman there. The thing is the middleman, and actually the relief comes from, we're not thinking about the thing anymore. So we're not thinking about that sad feeling, or we're not thinking about that despair, or we're not thinking about being high. So because our thinking moves on, our state of mind settles, and we feel better. And it looks like it's the drink or the gym or the cutting or whatever, but it never is. And people know that, because alcoholics will say that even holding a drink in my hand, I felt better before they've even ingested it. So it can't be physical. The guy who's cutting himself, you know, realizes that the cutting hasn't worked for some time. It used to be a relief, but it doesn't relieve him anymore. He still feels bad. And so he realizes actually that action is no longer necessary. So I don't know if that was quick enough, or if that was what you wanted me to say.
that was great. And when I was in prison that day, there was that that gentleman who sort of tested out the fact that he wasn't having drugs anymore. And he just kind of put it to the test one more time just to see. And he felt so much better in real life with his new understanding than he did on drugs. And it just lost its hold on him completely.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's lots of stories like that, but I brought it up because Jacqueline and Christine and I are going to have the most incredible pleasure and honor to be on Martha's Vineyard this September. And we're going to be doing a week-long program called The Ease of Transformation, Dissolving Patterns into Potential. And we're going to be talking about all of the patterns we can get into, whether it's a full-blown addiction or just patterns that don't feel like they're our true selves and really like what we're made of. And so we'll be doing that on Martha's Vineyard for a week at the end of September this year. And I'm really looking forward to that. And you can find out more about that if you're interested, or if you know anybody who does have either just a desire to go past where they've been or is struggling with an addiction. It's easeoftransformation.com. And I also wanted to say that we're all three going to be together again, also at the Realizing Potential online conference, which is October 27th to 30th. And that's realizingevents.com. And it's realizing with an S, realizingevents.com. So that's another place that we'll be really excited to share more stories and more, have a little bit more time to share, to go in deeper with more of you. So did you want to add anything to that, Jacqueline or Christine?
No, just that I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's going to be amazing.
I was joking with Jacqueline too, because when I first heard her, she made that comment about, I thought I'd be doing retreats on a beach somewhere someday.
And now I am. It didn't come the way I expected it to.
And it'll be complete with fitness and yoga and beach walks and beach and all kinds of wonderful things. So,
but we can cook some cabbage for you, Jacqueline, if you want to be reminded of home.
Oh, that's it, Christine. She's nailed it. Christine looks out for the details. She's got all the details.
Yeah, she's so good at that.
And is an amazing facilitator in her own right. You didn't get to today. It wasn't about her, but it is. It's always about her. In the end. Thank you all so much for being with us. Such a pleasure.
Yes, and
thank you so much.
Jacqueline, thank you, because Sharon is actually in England right now, so they are both here with us on a Friday evening. So I hope you have something to go do. That's fun for Friday night.
I really want to thank Three Principles New England, Christine Higgins, Three Principles New England. What she's put together is absolutely amazing and beautiful and of such a service. And when she wrote us and suggested bringing us together, it just felt like such a gift and a blessing and such a thoughtful thing to do. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. I get so much out of this. I mean, to be here with you all today, it's awesome. Can't ask for more. So thank you. And everyone enjoy your holiday weekend, whether you're in the UK or the US. We all have 3 days off. Woohoo!
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody. Amazing. Bye.
Thank you.